Welcome. Tonight we step inside the faded walls, locked evidence rooms, and mirror-lined interrogation chambers of America's haunted precincts, where justice long stopped breathing. This episode brings you 10 disturbing stories from police officers, dispatchers, and forensic techs who were stationed at precincts that on paper don't exist. Places buried in official silence. Places where radio calls come from stations that burned down decades ago, where prisoners whisper names no one should know, and where a mirror's reflection shows not who you are, but what's replacing you. These are not urban legends. These are real testimonies, unsanctioned, recovered, and redacted, filed quietly by those who walked out of the building but never quite made it home. Evidence rooms sealed from the inside. Surveillance footage that rewrites itself. Officers who vanish after their 30th shift, and the calls never stop. Subscribe channel for raw, atmospheric horror told through the real accounts of those who've seen too much. And if you've served in any precinct where the blueprints lie, tell us, what did the mirror show you that night you stayed too late? I knew something was off the second I stepped through the front door. The station smelled like mildew and old paper, like something had been rotting for a long time but never quite died. The air was heavy, not with dust but with the kind of stillness that clings to places nobody has touched in years. I should have turned around then. I really should have. I was staying in a small town in upstate New York, trying to clear my head after a pretty ugly breakup. I rented a cheap cottage on Airbnb, and figured a few weeks in isolation would help. One day I was hiking out by the river trail when I struck up a conversation with a local, an older guy, probably pushing 70, who told me about the police station. Said it had been abandoned since the late 80s but was still standing on the edge of town, swallowed by weeds and vines. "Bet you young folks love that creepy stuff," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then he told me he'd give me $100 if I'd spend the night in it. I should have just laughed it off, but boredom, ego, maybe a little bit of curiosity, they all got the better of me. I went back the next day with a flashlight, some snacks, and a camping pad. The plan was dead simple: stay overnight, take a few pictures, prove I did it, and leave by morning. The building looked worse up close. The front door was hanging off the hinges, windows cracked but not completely shattered. I stepped over a crumbling tile and broken glass. My boots echoed like I was shouting into an empty tunnel. The ceilings were bowing in some spots. Filing cabinets and paperwork lay scattered across the lobby like someone fled in a hurry years ago and never came back. Graffiti covered the walls, most of it juvenile, but here and there I saw handprints. Not painted or sprayed, but dark, greasy outlines. Smudged across the decaying plaster, they were too high to be from children, too distorted to be accidents. I set up my gear in what used to be the front desk area, beside a long-dead coffee maker and a moldy Rolodex. The sun was already setting outside. I tried not to think about how quickly the light was fading. I made a point of checking each hallway before it got dark, just to get a mental map. The cell block was in the back. Booking room, evidence locker, even a tiny break room with a vending machine full of fossilized candy bars. The holding cells creeped me out the most. Heavy iron bars, rusted but still intact. The doors were shut. No keys in sight. I could see inside just enough with my flashlight. One cell had something scratched into the back wall, deep enough that the letters were still legible. "It listens." I decided I wouldn't go near the cells again. I tried to settle in, but it was hard to relax. Every sound in that place carried. The dripping in the locker room, the occasional creak of old pipes, the scurrying of some animal I couldn't see. Around 10, I heard footsteps. I jumped up, light scanning the room, but I saw nothing. It was just one step, like someone had been standing completely still, then moved just once. I told myself old buildings make noises. That's what they do. But this felt different, deliberate. I started recording a voice memo on my phone, mostly to hear myself talk and break the silence. Something about the sound of my own voice made me feel less crazy. It even worked for a while until I played it back. At the 12-minute mark, right after I'd said, "I think I'm the only one here," there was another voice. Quiet. Croaking. "No, you said not." I listened again and again. It was there. Not just a glitch or echo. A whisper laced with something wet and phlegmy, like it came from deep in someone's throat. My heart started pounding. I wanted to leave, but my flashlight flickered and died right then, like something out of a bad horror movie. I had backup batteries, but my hands were shaking too hard to find them. So I just sat, in the half-glow of my phone screen, staring at the shadows until I finally worked up the nerve to move. I made my way to the break room, thinking maybe I'd just sit in the back, away from all the echoing hallways. But I stopped cold halfway across the station. One of the holding cell doors was open. I swear on everything it was locked earlier. Jammed, even. I'd tugged at it with both hands and it didn't budge. Now it hung wide, like it had been flung open violently, the kind of swing that leaves dents in the walls. I stood there, frozen, flashlight beam twitching as I gripped it too tight. There was something on the floor. At first I thought it was a stain, but it was textured. Matte black but glistening in spots. It looked like hair. A clump of long, wiry strands tangled with dried leaves and bits of something that might have been bone. I didn't check. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Of course there wasn't set. I told myself to walk. Keep walking. Get to the front door, leave, forget it ever happened. I turned around and that's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Closer this time. From the hallway that led deeper into the station. And breathing, labored, static-soaked breathing, like someone was trying to breathe through water. I ducked into the break room and slammed the door quietly behind me. There was no lock, just a flimsy knob, so I pushed a chair under it and crouched in the corner, holding my breath. The breathing got louder. It was outside the door now, and I could hear something dragging across the tiles like nails or claws. It scraped once against the door, then stopped. No footsteps walking away, no sound at all after that. I waited 30 minutes before moving again. At least I think it was 30. Time stopped working in that place. When I finally opened the break room door, the hallway was empty. Except it wasn't, because someone had left something on the floor. A single police badge, face down, right in the center of the hall. I walked over and picked it up. It was cold. Too cold. Like it had been submerged in ice. I turned it over. My name was on it. Not just the name. My photo. In uniform. Date issued tomorrow. My knees nearly gave out. I don't remember how I got back to the front lobby. I think adrenaline took over. I remember seeing the exit, running for it, practically diving out that rotting door into the overgrown parking lot. I didn't stop till I reached my car. Didn't breathe until I was halfway back to the cottage. The guy who dared me, the old local, was just gone. I went back into town the next day to ask about him, but no one knew who I was talking about. Descriptions, name, everything. Nobody matched it. Like he never existed. I deleted the voice memo. I wanted to forget it all. For a while I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress, isolation, creating shadows in my head. Then the mail arrived. No return address, just a small brown envelope sealed in red tape. I opened it, already feeling the nausea rising in my gut. Inside was a sheet of paper, only 4 words typewritten in all caps. "You start tomorrow, welcome." There was a badge inside the envelope, the same one I'd found on the floor, same name, same photo, same date. I moved across the country that week, but I haven't thrown it out. The badge, I keep trying to. Every time I leave it in a trash can, a park, a donation box, it shows back up on my doorstep, cleaned, polished, like it sits waiting. I knew something was wrong the second I walked into the evidence room. The air tasted metallic like blood and battery acid, and it was cold, way colder than the rest of the station. I remember thinking maybe the AC's busted, but nothing else in the building felt like that. It settled in your clothes like the kind of cold that sticks to your bones. It was my first day as a patrol officer in a town I'd never even heard of before I applied for the job, Hollow Ridge, Pennsylvania. Population maybe 6,000 if you counted pets. The department was small, like only 6 full-time officers small. I'd relocated after moving out of Philly. Needed a fresh start after what happened on the force back there after my old partner. Never mind. I didn't come here to talk about that. Anyway, I was trying to keep my head down and be the rookie who didn't screw up. The day went normal enough at first: paperwork, orientation, a half-assed tour of the station. Chief Reynolds was chill, just one of those close-to-retirement types who looked like he'd given up having opinions years ago. He handed me a badge and said, "Don't touch what you don't understand," then laughed and told me that was their version of hazing. I laughed too. I thought he was joking. By 4 p.m. most of the guys were already gone. Only Reynolds and Officer Maddox remained. Maddox was weird. Real quiet, heavy smoker, always watching people like he was counting every blink they made. He offered to show me the evidence room before he clocked out. I said sure. The evidence room was downstairs in the old part of the building, the section they never renovated. The stairs creaked like bones under a bedsheet, and the walls down there were this grayish yellow like dried sweat. The hallway leading to it had just one flickering light, one of those yellowed fluorescent tubes that buzzed like it was angry to be alive. Before Maddox left me, he handed me a key ring with a big brass tag stamped E0. He didn't say anything, just pointed to the door, turned and left. Now I'm not paranoid. I've worked some rough beats, seen things that would keep most people awake at night, but that hallway felt wrong, like weighted, breathing heavier than it should have been. Still, I unlocked the door. The evidence room was larger than I expected. No windows, of course, and only one flickering overhead light. Rows of metal shelves stretched deep into the room, full of dusty boxes. Some shelves had huge bins with half-torn tags, drunk and disorderly. Narcotics, homicide. I saw old shotguns tied off with zip ties, rusted chains in clear bags, a kid's backpack tagged from 1994. That's when I started smelling it. A sour stink like mildew and bile. I turned, expecting to see some rat carcass or maybe a leaky pipe, but nope, the room was dead still except for something weird. One of the evidence bins in the back was open. No tag, no label. Just empty. I should have left then, shut the door, walked out, told the chief something about a maintenance check, but I didn't. Instead, I walked in. As I approached the back, the buzzing light above me cut out completely, leaving only the thin blue beam from my little mag light. Shadows turned sharp. Every shelf squeaked as I moved past, like they were reacting to me, like they knew I didn't belong there. I was about 5 steps from the open bin when I heard a sound like shuffling, wet, dragging shuffling. Not heavy like footsteps. Lighter, quicker, like something crawling. The beam of my light trembled. I spun around, but nothing was there. Then I saw it. Down the far end of the aisle between 2 shelves something moved. Just a flash. Skin or maybe cloth, barely there before it slipped between the shelves. I tried to call out, but my voice cracked halfway out of my throat. It didn't feel like a person. Don't ask me how I know. You just feel something different when it's human. You can tell the rhythm, the hesitations. That thing moved with intent, like it knew the layout better than I did. So I backed up, slowly, light scanning side to side. I heard a whisper, then barely audible. "Still here." I froze, thought maybe it was the radio crackling. Checked my shoulder. Dead silent. I turned to leave but stopped dead when I realized the door I had come in through was now closed, locked from the inside. That brass tag key, gone. I checked the floor, my pockets. Nothing. That's when the light came back on, flickering like it had just been kicked, and I saw something new. There were handprints all over the shelves, dark, oily ones, but not normal size. Not kid-sized either. Something in between, too long, too thin, with smears where the skin should have ended. I'm trained, okay? I've worked domestic calls that turned into hostage standoffs. I've pulled people off window ledges. But standing in that room, seeing those impossible prints, hearing those whispers that I knew were real, all the training meant squat. I was shaking so bad my belt clattered. I turned back toward the open bin. Something inside it was breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. The box wasn't moving, but the air around it pulsed. My light hit the edges of it, and I realized it wasn't empty anymore. There was a face. Not a full face, more like a mask made of skin stitched crudely, mismatched tones melted in spots like someone tried to burn it off. 2 eye holes, one ripped wider than the other. Its mouth hung open, but not in a scream, more like a smile. A grotesque, oily grin. I heard a scrape behind me. It wasn't set in the bin anymore. I ran. I didn't think so. I just flew through the aisles, slamming into carts and boxes, tearing open my palm on something sharp and rusted. The blood smeared onto everything I touched. The door didn't open immediately. I jammed every key on the ring, shaking, near hyperventilating, until I heard a faint click. The handle turned. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it from the outside with a different key. Then I turned and saw Maddox. He was standing by the stairwell, still as stone, eyes locked on me. He didn't say a single word. I was bleeding, gasping, almost crying, and all he did was light a cigarette and nod like he expected this to happen. I said, "There's something in there." Still nothing. Eventually the chief came down. I told him everything, like an idiot, face, breathing, the door locking, the voice. I expected him to laugh or radio someone for a psych eval. But all he said was, "Good, means it likes you." He took my badge, told me to take a week off. When I came back the next Monday, the evidence room door had a new padlock. I was told not to ask questions. Since then, Maddox barely speaks to me. The chief acts like it never happened. But every few nights late on patrol, when the scanner goes quiet, I look back at the station from across the lot and I swear I see something shift in the window downstairs. The other night I started hearing a voice on the radio, static breaking through, whispering in that same wet croak. "Still here, you left the door open." I didn't sit. I know I locked it. I check the keys every night. That brass tag is back on my ring now. I never put it there. And sometimes when I walk by the evidence room, the lock feels warm, like something's breathing right behind it. Waiting. When I got the transfer order, I thought it was some kind of clerical mistake. I was working out of Philly's Northeast Division, mostly patrol and missing persons cases. Nothing that pointed to a promotion or relocation. But one morning I got an email. No name, no badge number, just instructions. Report to Precinct 117, effective immediately. I said, "Never heard of Precinct 117. I checked every internal record system I had access to. Nothing. Not in the city. Not in the county. Even my sergeant raised an eyebrow when I told him. Said it wasn't on our map, but sometimes departments open special divisions for cold cases or off-the-books work. If they want you," he said, handing me the printout, "don't ask too many questions." That should have been the first red flag. The location they gave me was up in the hills, almost an hour outside of the city. No street name, no coordinates, just a folded page with a hand-drawn route and the words "Follow carefully" underlined at the bottom. GPS didn't work when I tried it. Service cut out maybe 15 minutes after heading off the main highway. It was like driving into dead space. The road turned to gravel, then dirt. Trees got denser, the kind where you can't see 10 feet in. No lights, no mailboxes, no signs of anyone living out there, just gnats, birds, and silence. Eventually I came to a clearing I'd never seen before, an old brick station, rusted precinct plaque, no cars in the lot. It looked like it had been built sometime in the mid-20th century, maybe earlier. Half the windows were boarded. One was cracked open like it had been pried instead of broken. The whole place gave off this stale air. You know that smell of overcooked metal and dried blood? Inside was dim. Power was on, barely. Flickering fluorescence. The walls were stained with old water damage. Curled photos on bulletin boards nobody had touched in years. There were desks, 6 or 7 half covered in old papers and moldy coffee cups. Decades of dust blanketed most of the corners. There was one other person in the building. A man in full uniform. He didn't say his name. Didn't offer a handshake, just handed me a key ring and a short form that simply said, "I acknowledge my voluntary acceptance of duty at this location." I asked him, duty to what exactly? He looked right through me and said, "Just monitor the calls, that's all we sit here for." Calls? There was no working comms gear, no computer systems, not even a live landline. Just an old rotary phone bolted to the wall in the main office. Black. Scratched to hell. I asked if it worked. He said, "Only certain nights." He never explained what that meant. For the first 2 nights, nothing happened. My shift started at midnight, ran till 6 a.m. Nobody relieved me. The other officer, I guess he was the commanding officer, slept in a back room during the day and disappeared at night. Not left the station, I mean literally disappeared. I checked the whole place once. Every door locked, windows sealed, supply rooms empty. He was just gone after sundown. Wednesday night the phone rang. Rotary phone. No screen, no caller ID. Just one shrill ring that sounded like someone screaming into metal. Then again, I picked it up. Static. For a second I thought it was broken. Then a voice. Hollow. Metallic. Barely audible. Like it was hauling itself through a mile of mud just to speak. Room 4. That's all it said before the line went dead. There is no room 4 in the precinct. There's a storage closet with a peeling 04 sticker above it, but it's definitely not a room. I opened it anyway. Light switch didn't work. Inside it smelled like soaked drywall and something rotting, not dead animal rot, human rot. The warm, fatty kind that clings to your throat. I found a jacket. Bloody, old but still damp. Under it was a badge. One that looked exactly like mine except the name had been scratched out, not worn out, erased. I checked the serial, didn't match any known issue format, just 3 letters. CSP. I locked the closet and went back to the desk, stared at the rotary phone like it might ring again. It didn't. Not that night. The next night I started hearing footsteps above me even though the second floor had long been condemned, full-on pacing. Sometimes heavy, sometimes quick and panicked. I asked the other officer about it the next day. "You hear it now too?" he said, like I just brought up the weather. Took 3 months before I heard them. I asked what it was. He paused, said, "We are here to answer the calls, nothing else." The phone kept ringing over that week. Never a pattern, never a caller ID. Always the same voice, now giving different words. Locker 6. She sits still under the floor. That's not him anymore. Each time I followed what it said. Each time I found something. A rusted knife. A cassette tape with no audio. A pair of shoes, both left foot. Once I found a message scrawled in charcoal under the breakroom table. "I'm next." The other guy didn't react to any of it, just told me to catalog what I found, then return it to the drawer. I asked him what drawer. He pointed to the evidence room in the basement. Same drawer every time. No lock. Freezing cold. Like the kind of cold you only find in morgues or mountain tunnels. That's when I started noticing something that really scared me. Every shift, small things changed. The clock hands skewed. The names on the dusty bulletin board were different. Mugs on desks moved 3 inches to the left. A newspaper on the floor had a date that hadn't come yet, October 19th, 2025. And in the corner of one Polaroid you could see half of a face behind the window. It was mine. But I hadn't been there when that photo was taken. I started documenting it all, taking photos, recording audio, but the files came out blank, or worse, wrong. One audio clip I played back just whispered the words, "Stay, stay, stay, stay," for 40 minutes straight, even though I'd only recorded 5 seconds of dead air. I tried searching for the precinct again, online, records, even state archives. Nothing. No building permits. No mention of CSP. Nothing about officers registered to this location. It wasn't just unlisted, it had been scrubbed. I asked the officer why we were here. He finally replied with something different. "We weren't assigned here, we were called here." I tried quitting. I packed my gear, drove back the next morning. But no matter what I entered into my GPS, somehow I kept ending up back at the turn-off road. I physically couldn't navigate away, like something had mapped me into its location. Yesterday I woke up to find something scratched on my car window from the inside, accepted D. Last night the calls changed. The voice was clearer, not static anymore, human, familiar. It was me, not someone impersonating me. Not similar. Never seldom mallet ke. There's something behind you, don't turn around. Just lock the drawer. Do it now. It repeated that over and over. I locked the drawer. I haven't seen the other officers since. But a new one showed up around midnight, said they were assigned here, handed me a form. I looked confused, asked me what CSP stood for. I told them not to ask too many questions. It sets 5:52 a.m. now. The phone hasn't rung yet. But I know it will. Because I finally checked the bulletin board again, and there's a new photo pinned near the center. It's still developing, but I can already see their faces showing up behind the glass. Not me this time. I don't care what anyone says. There is a cell 6. They'll tell you there are only 5 holding cells in our precinct. Even the blueprints agree. 5. You can walk down the hallway on your first day, count the heavy steel doors yourself. 1 to 5. But if you're ever unlucky enough to be on solo night duty like I was last Wednesday, you might pass by that last hallway mirror just before the sally port and you'll see something else. A 6th door slightly open. That night started weird before the shift even began. Dispatch sent me out to pick up a trespasser behind the old railway yard. Said he was just standing between 2 rusted freight cars, not moving, not speaking. The weirdest part was the tone dispatch used, like they were scared. You don't get that often from people who've heard every kind of 911 call. When I got there, I saw him immediately. A man, maybe mid-30s. Standing completely still in the middle of the tracks, pale, too pale, like he was made of wax and cold air, wearing old tattered pants, white tank top, and a pair of muddy cracked leather shoes that looked like they belonged in a museum. He didn't fight, didn't speak a word. He turned to look at me. Eyes glassy, white ring around the irises like he'd been cryogenically frozen, and just nodded once, real slow. I cuffed him, read him the script, and drove him back to the station. Told myself maybe it was just a bad mental health case. I'd seen worse. The minute we stepped through the steel security doors, everything shifted. The lights dimmed slightly, like someone had turned down the brightness by 10%. Not enough to notice consciously, but just enough to make your stomach tighten, like your instincts were getting second-hand fear. That was my first solo night shift since transferring in. Everyone jokes about graveyard watch being nothing but paperwork and coffee, but I tried to do everything by the book. Logged the guy into our internal system, gave him the name John Doe. I tried fingerprinting him, but the scanner threw an error I'd never seen before. File already exists, entry date March 4th, 1973. I literally laughed out loud at that. I thought some IT intern was messing with me. Tried again. Same error. I set him up in cell 2, last empty one we had. Locked the door. He sat down on the cot, folded his hands in his lap like he was waiting for a goddamn priest to bring him his last rites. Still hadn't said a word. 2 hours later, I was working on a report when I saw something flicker on the corner security monitor. You know how old cams sometimes glitch and loop their feed? That's what it looked like. I glanced over, planning to bang the side of it like that'd help, but it wasn't a glitch. It was John Doe, but not in cell 2. He was in cell 6. Except there's no cell 6. You know those cold adrenaline spikes you get when something logical breaks? The way your brain tries to explain things faster than your body can react. I stood up so fast my chair rolled halfway across the room. I walked back to the holding wing, one hand resting on the butt of my belt. Cell 2's door was wide open, but it wasn't busted or forced, just unlocked. And empty. The air was colder down that hallway now, that fluorescent hum that fills most stations. Dead silent, the hairs on my neck stood all the way up. I walked slowly toward the end of the hallway, toward the wall where cells end at room 5, except in the mirror across from the hallway, our standard security convex mirror, I could clearly see a 6th door. Not just see it, hear it. A faint, dragging breath. I turned to face the wall directly. Nothing, just bricks and a weird crack running down the mortar like something was forced in and concreted over. I told myself it was a trick of the eyes. Maybe my mind is pulling the shape of a 6th door from the mirrored distortion. I went back to my desk, sat down, tried to focus on writing the missing persons report I now had to file, because that's what you do when a person vanishes from a locked room under your watch. Then the feed changed again. Every cell cam flipped to one feed, grainy, flickering black and white. It showed a single view, inside cell 6. The camera shook lightly, like it was being handheld. The image burned my brain before I could tear my eyes from it. It was him, John Doe, sitting on the same disgusting cot smiling. Only now he was wearing a police uniform. Not ours. It was an old CPD uniform, 70s from the look of it, the kind with the navy wool and gold buttons. He looked the same age, same pale skin, same eyes. He held something up to the camera, slowly, carefully. It was my badge. I panicked. I ripped the monitor's cord clean out of the wall and went into full lockdown. Locked every internal door I could, called dispatch and told them I had a compromised detainee and needed backup. They said they'd send someone, hung up before I could give them any more detail. But they never came. Midnight passed. The lights in the main hallway began to click off one by one, a sequence. Deliberate, closer and closer to the main desk. Then static hissed through the radio on my shoulder. It crackled twice, then played a warped voice like a cassette melted halfway. You left me there in Death 73. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Everything in me wanted to run, but the building felt wrong, like it had grown. The corridors didn't lead to where they should anymore. I swear on my life. I walked out of the holding wing and ended up in the main locker room 3 times in a row. The doors kept rotating. The whole architecture of the place was bending. When the radio spoke again, it was right in my ear. Cell 6. Come lock the next door. I slammed the radio to the ground. Then, an alarm went off. External door breach. Either someone was in, or something wanted me to think they were. I grabbed my backup Glock from the equipment locker. Yes, I know protocol, but screw protocol when reality's twisted sideways. I swept hallway after hallway with it drawn, but there was nothing human in that building anymore. Just shadows that lingered too long when I turned a corner. Reflections in glass that moved when I didn't. That's when I felt it behind me. Cool and slow, like someone sitting calmly right at my back. I turned slowly, expecting to face him. But there was no one. Just the faint sound of a steel door locking, far, far down the hallway. I didn't go check. It's been 2 days. No one's relieved me. I tried using my personal phone, 0 bars. Dispatch doesn't answer anymore. Food's running low. The water's already bad. But the weirdest part? Every time I walk that hallway now, Cell 6 is just there. No mirror tricks, no illusions. It looks exactly like the others, all rust and forgotten paint. Only it's cleaner. It doesn't age like the others. There's never any dust on the floor. The cot stays made perfectly flat. And sometimes the door sips open. Just a little. Enough to see that John Doe's uniform now matches mine exactly. I finally checked the old logs in storage, found them buried in a drawer that hadn't been touched in decades. Thin yellow files, smudged with watermarks and cigarette burns. There was a cell 6. It was decommissioned in 1973 after an officer was accidentally locked in during a power outage. The logs say the body was never recovered. Only his badge was found outside the locked cell. The officer's name has been blacked out in every file, but the photo wasn't. I tore it out. I brought it to the bathroom, compared the face in the photo with the tired one in my mirror. It sups me. Or it will be. And I don't think anyone sits coming to let me out. The call came through at 3:14 a.m., right in the middle of the night shift when all the real weirdos like to come out. But this wasn't the usual drunk domestic fake prowler or half-coherent meth head screaming about shadow people. This was a 911 ping from a dispatch terminal that, according to our own records, no longer existed. It didn't even make sense at first. The screen lit up, but instead of a name or street address, the origin just said, Precinct 33, Dispatch Terminal 1. Right away I froze. There's no Precinct 33 in our county. Not anymore. It was demolished. Burned to the foundation actually 40 years ago after an electrical fire killed 3 officers and a dispatcher. Total loss. I'd only ever heard about it from old-timers at the station, and even they talked about it like something you say with a lowered voice. Ghost house. Someone once called it. Still takes calls. I thought it was a glitch until the line went live. A woman's voice crackled through like she was speaking through a CB radio 6 miles underwater, hissing, warped by time. Officer down, Precinct 33. We need assistance. He sits not. She stopped short. Then something scraped the line. He sets not human. I hit the record automatically like I was supposed to, though my fingers were shaking. There's no reason for any power to exist out there. The original building was razed. It doesn't even have a foundation anymore, just empty land boxed in by a rusted fence. A plaque stands nearby with the dedication date. But the ping, it was live. Triangulated. And somehow the signal was coming from that exact location. Against better judgment, I responded, This is Precinct 14 receiving. Please confirm your position. Dead silence for 5 seconds. Then a whisper, Stay off the 2nd floor. Click. Call dropped. No reconnect. I wanted to tell my sergeant, but by the time I looked down the hallway where the night crew usually hangs out, I realized something strange. The entire building felt like a vacuum. No footsteps, no chatter. Not even the smell of burnt coffee or that one guy's off-brand cologne that usually hung in the air. The place was empty. I walked to the station twice. No one. It was like I got pulled into a time loop and dropped into a hollowed-out version of my own life. My own badge number on the wall. My own locker. But every echo was off, like the building was holding its breath. So like an absolute idiot, I did the one thing I really shouldn't have. I drove to the location. I took my cruiser, logged the trip under a fake incident code so no one would question it. I figured worst case, someone hacked an old line and was using it to bait cops for some sick prank. Best case, I'd debunk a creepy local myth and have something kind of cool to talk about later. When I arrived, the air around the land was wrong. It was summer, but the area felt about 15 degrees colder. Fog pooled around the grass line like mist rolling off dry ice. The lights from my cruiser bounced strangely, too muted, like the beams were fighting through molasses. The lot was overgrown, no structure, just weeds, cracked asphalt boxed in with chain-link fencing. And beyond that, the carved stone sign from the dedication in 1978. Or that sips what I should have seen. Through the fog there was a building. Whole. Standing. Lit from the inside. Same old two-story structure I'd only ever seen in black and white newspaper clippings. Brick facade, navy trim, single front door with 33 carved just above it. I killed my engine and sat there with the door slightly cracked open, half expecting it to melt away like a projection. But it didn't. I walked through the gate. The metal of the fence buzzed when I touched it like touching an exposed wire. Each step toward the building felt heavier, harder to lift my boots. The air tasted like dust and gas. Not gasoline, like old fire, lingering heat and char. When I stepped inside, all the lights were on. Old fluorescents, faint buzzing overhead. The scent of melted plastic and soaked ash was strong, but the dust was minimal, like someone vacuumed minutes before I got there. The front desk was manned. A woman in uniform sat behind the glass partition, typing silently. Her movements were too smooth, mechanical almost. I tapped the glass lightly. She didn't flinch, just slowly looked up at me with eyes way too wide. Her pupils were gray, not gray-blue, just gray. She mouthed something. I stepped close. The second floor steps not safe. Then she vanished. Vanished. Like when tape burns away in the middle of a reel. One frame she was there, the next empty bench, chair still spinning slightly. I should have left. I know. Any sane person would have sprayed the building with gasoline and torched it for real, damn the history board. But my feet wouldn't move, like the floor had softened and swallowed the soles of my boots. That steps when I heard the radio. Upstairs. It was faint, just that telltale static and the occasional voice warped and distant, long, slow syllables. No words I could latch onto. So yeah, I went up. The stairs creaked beneath me, but not loud, more like they groaned in relief. Like everything up there was waiting and now it could breathe again. Halfway up I passed a portrait on the wall I swear hadn't been there before. A photo of a full squad, 1973, etched into the frame. I recognized none of them except the woman from the front desk. Her smile in the photo didn't reach her eyes. Her head was tilted toward the camera but not at it, like she was watching something just behind the lens. And one man in the photo had his face scratched out completely. The second floor was utterly quiet. I felt a change in pressure the moment I stepped onto it, like walking into a deep-sea tank, the kind that crushes you if you breathe wrong. Doors lined both sides, all open. Except one. The last door at the end of the hall, labeled only dispatch. The radio was louder now. I drew my weapon, not out of obligation but instinct. I didn't feel like a cop anymore. I felt like prey. I opened the door. The dispatcher station was perfectly intact. Microphones. Paper logs. The headset is still warm, dangling from the edge of the console. A figure sat in the chair, back turned, twitching slightly like he was listening to something through old headphones. I said, "Sir," because I didn't know what else to say. My voice cracked on the word like I was 13 again. He didn't move. It just slowly began humming. A broken tune. Childish. Something I almost remembered from when I used to ride in my dad's cruiser as a kid. I blinked, and suddenly he was right in front of me. No transition. Just gone from the chair, there in my face. His mouth didn't move, but I heard him speak, not in my ears, in my head. He told me where the fires end. What? Now I need a voice to answer. I tried to back away, but the hallway behind me was dark now. There were no stairs. I fired my weapon, 3 rounds, center mass. Hits, wet thumps, but no blood. The man just tilted his head, blinked and smiled, and said, "You already answered the call." I don't remember how I got out, just that suddenly I was sitting in my cruiser with the engine running. It was sunrise. My gun hadn't been fired. No shell casings. My radio was dead, and there were no signal bars on my phone. The lot behind me was empty. Like before. Precinct 33 was gone again. I tried to tell the others, but the internal log is missing. No call from 3:14 a.m., no badge record of me leaving the station. My body cam was wiped clean. Last night, the phone rang again. 911 terminal. Precinct 33. Only this time I was the one answering, and the voice on the other end? It was me, begging myself not to go upstairs. They warned me exactly once. Don asked about the room at the end of the east hallway. Sergeant Mallory told me while showing me around on my first day. Just walk past it. That's what we all do. I laughed. I thought he was trying to haze me, breaking the tension after dumping a stack of intake forms on my desk. The other officers didn't laugh, though. They just stared and said nothing. A few wouldn't even make eye contact. I didn't press it. I figured they were messing with the new guy. I'd transferred from a bigger city department downstate and landed a patrol spot in this tiny station up in Nowhere County. Small town, barely any crime, shifts so slow you could hear the radiator hiss from across the building. I figured if a weird door was the talk of the place, I'd landed a pretty good gig. Then I saw the room myself. 2 nights later, coming back from a late call about a possum stuck in a crawl space, I walked down that hallway. Lights were dim, the old kind that hum and flicker like something alive is trapped inside. The floor tiles were the same checkered pattern everywhere else in the station, but for some reason they stopped 2 feet before the door. After that it was just smooth concrete. The kind you'd use for a basement or a garage floor, unfinished, gray, cold. The door wasn't labeled. Every other door had a brass plaque: locker room, records, holding, armory. This one was just flat black. No window, no knob. Just a keyhole. Old-fashioned, like you'd find in a Victorian house. Ornate. Didn't match the rest of the building. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, pretending not to care why my breath felt colder near the seam of the door or why it smelled faintly of wet stone and mold. I left. Back near dispatch, I tried to make a joke about it. Something like, "Hey, what's seps with edgelord door back there? Someone trying to summon demons?" Mallory didn't even smile this time. He just said, "Just walk past it. That sip's what we all do." Weeks went by. Nothing weird happened. I figured it really was just nonsense. Some weird architectural leftover from the station's remodel in the 90s. But I started to notice things. Like how the temperature around that hallway was always colder than the rest of the building, even in the middle of July. Or how the cleaning staff wouldn't mop that section. I asked once, in passing. One of the older guys just muttered, "We don't get paid enough to touch that part," and walked off like he realized he said too much. I checked the blueprints. The building only officially had 15 rooms. That room, not listed, not even as storage. No wall cavity, no annex, just nothing. The more I ignored it, the more I felt it staring at me. I know how dumb that sounds, but there's something about that door that feels aware, like it waits. One night I was alone during overnight booking. Everyone else was out responding to a barn fire on the county border. I stayed behind, manning the desk. Around 2:30 a.m. the station phones all cut. No dial tone. Cell service too. Bars just dropped to 0 like I'd gone underground. That seps when I started hearing the knock. Not a fist knuckles. Human knuckles. On wood. It was coming from inside the hallway. Soft. Rhythmic. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. It echoed slightly, like it was coming through a thick wall. I stood up and went for the hall without thinking. Maybe someone got stuck. Maybe a suspect hiding in unused storage. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. A thick heat pooled in the center of my chest. My eyes started to water. Air got thick, heavy. The lights above the hallway buzzed high-pitched, borderline screaming. The smell was worse this time, like wet dirt, rotted drywall, and mildew that had teeth. There was a stain on the floor in front of the door. Fresh, dark. Like oil or blood or something thicker. It hadn't been there an hour ago. The knock started again. 3. Pause. 3. But this time I leaned in closer and I heard something else between them. Breathing. Slow, moist exhale, like something huge dragging air through two small lungs. I backed away, fast. I walked straight out, got in my cruiser and drove around until the radios came back on. Didn't care if it broke protocol. I needed something normal to reset my brain. The next morning I asked Mallory again. No jokes this time, just what sips in there? He stared past me for a full 10 seconds before speaking. When I was a rookie in SIPS 93, Morales tried to open it, took a baton to the hinges. I waited. Mallory wiped a hand down his face, like he was exhausted by the memory. The hinges didn't budge, but the keyhole bled. I thought I misheard. What? It trickled from the slit, red, smelled like copper. He nodded once. He tried again the next week, had a key ground special to match the cut. What happened? He never used it. Got to the hallway. I started screaming, screamed until he passed out. I asked what he saw. Mallory just said he wouldn't say, then he couldn't set. Apparently, 2 days later, Morales hanged himself in the locker room. He left no note. Just a key on a chain and a message scratched into the underside of his desk drawer. Door eats memories. I didn't believe it. I couldn't. It was either a full-blown urban legend or these guys had been sniffing too much black mold in the basement. But I still couldn't help myself. 1 week later, another solo night shift. I brought bolt cutters. Waited until after 3 a.m. because for some reason the air around the hallway seems thickest after that. The smell was there immediately, heavier than ever before, like decay and wet firewood soaked in vinegar. I tried using a flashlight, but it flickered out as soon as I aimed it at the door. I tried pushing against the frame, rock solid. I fit the cutter into the gap near the deadbolt and squeezed. The door didn't break, but it moved. Just an inch. Enough for air to escape. And with that air came the sound. Whimpering. No. Begging. Someone inside was murmuring, repeating the same phrase over and over again. Help me remember. Help me remember. Help me remember. A wet scraping sound followed, like someone dragging fingers down a cement wall, slowly shredding skin off bones. Then, faster than anything, a loud slam from the inside. I bolted. Didn't stop until I threw up in the parking lot. For the next 2 days I couldn't remember my badge number. Kept mixing up my own last name, writing J. Hammond instead of Herrero on my case files. I don't even know anyone named Hammond. Do you know what sits worse? No one noticed. It's been 6 weeks. I've started getting migraines. Sharp ones always when I'm within 50 feet of that hallway. Some nights when I finally leave for the day, I find keys I don't remember carrying in my back pocket. Not my car, not my flat. They're old. Iron. Rusted. It's always cold. And every time I throw them in the river behind the station. And every time one shows up in my locker the next morning. No one wants to talk about the door. I don't think they choose to be quiet. I think the room makes them forget. Make them part of it. I've started writing post-it notes to myself just in case. One is in my glove compartment. One is in my wallet. And one is taped under my desk drawer. Just 2 words. Donnie Taupin. I know how this sounds, but I'm telling you, I never logged that call. I never responded to that address. I never stepped foot into that house. I wasn't even on shift that night. And yet the body cam footage exists. Full 47 minutes of it. Time-stamped, geotagged and marked under my own badge ID. Officer Miller, Unit 5372. My name, my voice, my face. It started 2 days ago. I was working overtime at the sheriff's department. mostly doing admin, reviewing use of force cases, copying digital evidence for trial subpoenas. You get used to staring at grainy, jostling body cam footage until it all starts to blur together. Same suspects, same sad houses, same echoing hallway screams. But this video was different. It was sitting alone in a server folder labeled unsorted, flagged, which usually means something got auto-uploaded from a cruiser or a body cam and hadn't been reviewed yet. I clicked it out of boredom. The footage begins with me, well, my body, sitting in the front seat of my unit parked just outside a 2-story house on Elk Forest Lane. I don't recognize the house. I don't recognize the street. I checked the timestamp, 2:11 a.m. 3 nights ago. I was off that night. I remember it clearly because my girlfriend and I were halfway through a Netflix binge when I passed out at her place. But in the footage, I'm alone, dressed in full uniform, breathing hard like I've been running or maybe hyperventilating. The cam jitters as I step out of the cruiser, radio in, and approach the house. No sirens. No backup. Exterior looks normal, patchy lawn, porch light flickering. One of those homes that feels quiet in the wrong way. You can't hear insects. No traffic in the distance. Windows all shut. Not a light on inside. I watch myself knock on the door 3 times. Softly, not standard protocol. I don't announce myself. No one answers. Instead of calling it in or waiting, I reach down and try the knob. It opens. That sent a chill up my neck, because that's not me. I don't go in without cause, especially not solo. As I step inside on the footage, the audio on the body cam changes. It goes flat, like the air got sucked out of the room. Everything is muffled, like someone covered the mic with cloth, but you can still hear groaning somewhere upstairs, or maybe below. The camera swings around to show a cluttered living room. Blank TV screen glowing faint blue. Plastic sheet over the couch. The carpet's stained everywhere like old water damage, but some are darker, like blood that dried and never got cleaned. Then something happened that made me stop the video entirely. The cam flashes quickly as I pass a hallway mirror. And in the reflection, the person wearing my uniform isn't me. At least, not exactly. It looks like me. Same height, same posture, but there's something off. Eyes too wide, mouth slightly open like they're breathing through their teeth. Eyes locked on the mirror, not checking surroundings, not clearing rooms, just staring, frozen, watching me. I felt sick, like I was on the verge of remembering something awful. I paused the video and pulled the unit movement logs just to prove to myself that something was broken. But the logs showed Unit 5372 did in fact leave the garage that night and return just after 3 a.m. No GPS trail except for a single ping at 2:12 a.m. at the same house in the video. The weird thing, that house at Elk Forest Lane, it was demolished in 2014. I quadruple checked. It was condemned after a drug fire took down most of that block. There are Google Earth images showing it as an empty lot ever since. There shouldn't be a house to walk into. But the footage keeps going. I pressed play again just to prove to myself it was a deep fake, or maybe someone made a mock run through a film set or something. Now my cam is going up the stairs. They're narrow, old, the kind that creak before you step. Whoever's wearing the camera doesn't hesitate. No flashlight, just walking like they already know where everything is. From the angle you can see a door halfway open at the end of the hall. There's a light coming from underneath. That same gross blue glow, a buzz like an old TV left on mute. I heard a voice. Danny. That sits my first name. A woman sits voice. Flat. Distant. Again, Danny, why did you leave me here? The camera doesn't move for 10, maybe 15 seconds. You can hear heavy breathing on the mic, but the frame stays locked on the door at the end of the hall. Then, without warning, it jolts forward, kicks the door open. Inside is a room completely covered in plastic sheeting, ceiling to floor. even over the windows. A twin bed sits in the corner with a body lying on it, wrapped in a black sheet. The figure is small, looks like a girl. Bare feet stick out at the bottom, one twisted hard to the side like it was broken months ago. Whoever's filming walks toward her slowly. She sits up, still wrapped, head tilting forward, but the sheet stays perfectly over her face. Hard cut. The footage skips 17 minutes forward. Now the cam is outside again, walking back to the cruiser. There's blood on the boots. And the person behind the camera, the one wearing my uniform, starts to hum a little tune I recognize but can't quite place. Then they lift something into frame. A second body cam. My actual one. That's when I stopped watching, disconnected the terminal, unplugged the power entirely, and just sat in silence with my stomach folding into itself. I haven't told anyone. Not Sergeant Hall, not the tech guys, nobody. Because I know what it looks like. A call logged to my unit, to a house that doesn't exist anymore, with footage of me responding solo and entering a crime scene that technically hasn't happened. What am I supposed to say? That I found footage of myself committing a break-in and potentially a homicide while I was asleep. And now things are happening outside of the footage. Today, I found mud on the floorboards of my cruiser, same color as the yard in the video. My personal body cam was missing. When I checked the log, the last upload says footage corrupt, manual entry delayed. The last frame, a close-up of my own face taken at 2:14 a.m. The only difference was, my eyes were shut. Like I was sleeping through the entire thing. Or pretending. Or worse, someone else was wearing me like a uniform. Every night since then, I've woken up at exactly 2:11 a.m. Each time my phone alarm goes off, even if I didn't set it. Each time it's playing that same quiet tune. And every night, no matter how hard I lock my front door, there are faint footsteps in my hallway. The worst part? Just now, just before I started writing this, I found something under my bed. A plastic evidence bag. Inside it is a small girl Sip's shoe. Dried blood on the sole. And the label? Elk Forest Lane, recovered by Officer D. Miller. Nobody told me about the 30-day curse until day 12. That Sips when Officer Taylor, the only guy remotely close to my age in the whole department, pulled me aside in the locker room, looked me dead in the eye and muttered, "Don Set unpacked too much." At first I thought he was talking about the job, like a metaphor or something. But no, he glanced at the calendar on the back wall, the one with all the coffee stains and faded Sharpie notes, and tapped his finger exactly 30 days forward from my hire date. His knuckles were shaking slightly. He said, "Quieter this time, make it to day 31 and you're good." But nobody ever does. I laughed. I shouldn't have. Not with the way he looked. Thing is, I already knew something was weird about Ashton PD. Real small force, barely 10 full-timers on the roster, no detectives, no real funding. But when I applied 6 months ago, they hired me before I even finished the background check. I figured the town was just desperate. Budget cuts, isolated location, not enough recruits lining up for small-town calls about cows on the road, and 911 butt dials. But from my first shift, little things weren't adding up. For one, 2 lockers were empty, never used, and had dust on the handles. I asked about them. "Leftovers," said the captain. "People move on." But when I checked the names, they weren't in the system. No resignation forms, no transfers, nothing. During roll call on day 6, I noticed a photo board near the briefing room, full of old smiling faces, badges and all, snapshots of officers I didn't recognize, but the spaces under 4 of them were left blank. No names, no date stamps. I asked Taylor about that too. He muttered something like, "Nobody stays," but kept tapping his toe like he was anxious to not answer the question fully. Then came the call on day 18. Domestic disturbance. An address right on the edge of town. Nothing about that incident would have stuck in my head normally. Just a guy yelling, wife locked in the bedroom, neighbors complaining. Classic small-town blow-up. Only when we pulled up, the house looked odd. Abandoned. Boards over the windows. Yard overgrown. Dust and dead bugs piled thick around the stoop, like no one had lived there for years, not hours. I called it in. Dispatch replied like nothing was strange. Said Unit 4 handled this one last time. I glanced at my partner. Taylor, weren't set we Unit 4? He didn't answer, just rolled past the gate. Shoulders tense, mouth pursed. He didn't even knock when we got out. Just stood there staring at the door like if he waited long enough something would come out on its own. When I asked him what happened the last time, he just climbed back into the cruiser and radioed in that the call was cleared, no contact. That's when I really started counting the days. I looked up every officer hired in the last 10 years. Only a handful came through, and all of them gone within a month. No forwarding addresses, no family listed, no chit-chat from the senior guys. They just vanished. The department wouldn't admit it, but the signs were everywhere. Taylor had a calendar app that counted down from 30. To this day, I'm not allowed into the archives room on the second floor, even though protocol says all officers have access. On day 21, I found a note taped inside my patrol car glove box. Just a scrap of paper folded neatly in half with my own handwriting, except I never wrote it. It said, "You've been here before." I started sleeping in my gear. Kept a backup recorder in my pocket. My girlfriend says I talk in my sleep now, muttering strange badge numbers that don't exist. The captain told me I seemed tense. Yeah, no kidding. By day 25, Taylor stopped showing up. His shift just disappeared from the log. Dispatch claimed he called out sick. His badge was gone from his locker. His name was wiped from the shared schedule app. No one seemed worried. In fact, when I mentioned him, Officer Barkley, an old-timer with robot nerves, blinked at me and said, "Taylor, never heard of him." Like we hadn't at work 12 shifts together. Like I hadn't eaten lunch with him just last week. I tried calling him. The cell was disconnected. I drove to his listed address, empty mobile home, flooring pulled out, power off, mail never delivered. I watched the body cam footage of our past calls just to see if I was crazy. In every one, Taylor's voice is there, but his face is never in frame. Not once. Day 26, the dream started. I wake up in the station, even when I remember falling asleep at home. The lights inside are off. Files on desks are open, but the writing is unintelligible, like someone hand-wrote it in a language only they understand. There's a ticking sound in the ceiling tiles overhead, like nails tapping from the inside. I open my locker in the dream. My badge is in there, melted into the lining of my hat, and something behind me breathes. Every time I look, my reflection in the locker mirror is wrong, like me, but out of sync, blinking late, smiling when I'm not. Yesterday was day 28. I asked the captain for a copy of my hiring file. He said, "We don't just keep physical files, but you sir doing great work, Officer Taylor." Taylor. He called me Taylor. I corrected him. He looked confused for a second, like I glitched. Then he smiled like I sit past some kind of test and said, right, Miller. That Sep's not my last name either. So I asked Barkley what sets my name. He paused, his lip twitched, and he softly closed the locker he was working in. Then he whispered, "You Seb only got 2 days left. Now it sits day 29. I can't leave. I've tried. The tires on my cruiser shredded when I crossed the town line. When I called for a tow, the operator paused halfway through, confirming the location, and whispered, 30 days, officer. 30 is all it needs." My hands have been shaking all morning. My fingers don't type the way they used to. There's an envelope I found in the inbox tray this morning, addressed simply to the next one. Inside is a folded map of the town, and every building has a red X on it, except the police station. Underneath it, a line written in the same handwriting from the note I never wrote. "Count the mirrors. The real you is the one that flinches." No one else can see the envelope, I asked. They said the tray was empty. It sips after midnight now. 30 has started. I think something is in the station with me, just out of view. I hear footprints that pause when I listen for them. I shut off the lights in one room, and when they flickered back on, one of the blank name tags on the wall had my last name burned into it. The funny thing is, I can't remember what my last name is anymore. Forget surviving day 31. I just want to remember who the hell I was before I put on this badge. Before they made me them. And the worst part, I just heard someone knocking at the front door. Says he sits my replacement. When he walked through the front doors, everything just stopped. The room had been quiet already. Graveyard shift at the precinct is always more coffee than crime, but this wasn't the usual kind of silence. This was heavy. Artificial. The kind of quiet you feel behind your ribs, like the air itself locked up and forgot how to move. He walked in slowly, calm, covered in blood from his shoulders down. His shirt, once white, was drenched dark red, clinging to his chest and arms like syrup. His jeans looked soaked and stiff, patches of rust-colored fluid dried around the knees and thighs, as if he'd been kneeling in it. Blood dripped from the tips of his fingers, smacking the tile floor quietly, rhythmically. It was still warm. You could smell it as soon as he stepped past the front gate. That coppery tang, too thick and too fresh. But it wasn't the blood that got to me. It was the smile. Wide, too wide. The kind of smile people wear when they're either in love or entirely broken inside. I stood first. I was closest to the entrance. He stopped a few feet away from me and just stood there, swaying slightly from side to side like a kid rocking to music only he could hear. His eyes didn't blink. His face didn't twitch. Every muscle below his lips sat quiet and slack except for that terrible curve of his mouth. "Can I help you?" I asked, calm but clipped. My hand drifted toward my holster just in case. He didn't just look around. Just locked eyes with me and said very plainly, "I sit 'em done now." That's it. No shouting, no tension in his voice. Just 3 words spoken softly, like they should make perfect sense. Dispatch heard it over the front desk mic and paged the others immediately. Officer McDaniels came out of the back hallway with her hand resting on her waistband, brows raised. When she saw him standing like that, wet, smiling yellow light pooling around his boots, her other hand crept toward her baton. She didn't draw. Not yet. We processed him on the spot. Standard protocol for walk-ins, even ones covered in blood. No ID, no phone. Just the name Jason Lee, a birth year that made him late 20s, and a speech pattern that didn't suit either. He didn't resist. Didn't complain. Didn't act troubled. He answered every question like he was ordering from a menu. Calm, polite, predictable in all the wrong ways. But something was off. I knew it. McDaniels knew it. It wasn't just the blood. It was the way he smiled after every question. The way he nodded like he already knew what we were going to say. Like he'd been through this exact routine before. I read him his Miranda rights. His smile never changed. "You understand these rights?" He said thank you like I'd just let him go. We took him back to holding cell 2 and locked him in. He sat down slowly, folded his hands in his lap and grinned at the wall like it was about to whisper a story to him. We impounded the boots and clothes, took blood samples, photographed everything. Here's steps where things took a hard left into the surreal. None of the blood matched the database. We're not just talking about fingerprints or facial recognition. I mean the blood covering him on his face, his chest, rubbed behind his ears like it had been applied on purpose, did not match any victims in CODIS or local missing persons. No connections, no leads, not even a partial hit. It was like we were holding a crime scene, but the rest of the crime hadn't happened yet. Captain told us to hold him overnight. Psychiatric eval in the morning. Maybe he was schizophrenic off his meds. Maybe it was fake, some TikTok clout-chasing garbage. But every minute he sat in that cell, the building felt stranger. The vending machine in the break room shut off mid-humming. Fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed like static over a radio. One erupted in the hallway near evidence lockup. McDaniels said it shattered right after she walked past it. I started checking in every half hour. Every time I passed by the cell, he was sitting the exact same way. Hands folded, facing the corner, smiling, not pacing, not moving, not sleeping, almost like he was posing. And I'm telling you, the building started holding its breath with him, like everything had curled inward. Around 3:30 a.m., I poured myself another stale, burning cup of coffee and sat down at my desk. That's when the thought hit me. We never asked him what he was done with. We all assumed it had to be murder, right? No one walks in soaked in blood for kicks. But no one ever actually asked. So I headed back to observation and sat behind the mic for cell 2, where he'd been sitting perfectly still for hours. Camera feed showed the same thing, him absolutely motionless except for the rise and fall of his chest. I clicked the mic and broke the silence. You said you were done sick earlier. Done with what? He looked up immediately. Too fast. Like he'd just been waiting for that question. Then he said, I gave it what it wanted. What did? His smile grew, and for a second I swear his eyes twitched in opposite directions. The door. Heart dropped. What door? His head tilted. You know, soon it always chooses someone new. I let the mic go hot in case he went on, but he didn't say one more word. Just let his head tilt a little more toward the wall. His grin wider now. Mottled teeth. Dried blood in the grooves of his gums. My skin crawled, literally crawled, like something sharp and electric was threading through my spine. 15 minutes later, McDaniels radioed, You better come up here. Second floor hallway. I assumed maybe a ceiling leak, cracked tile, something mundane. But when I got upstairs, I saw it immediately. A door, tucked into the back wall of the hallway near the storage closets. That wall had always been blank. No frame, no arch, no foundation plans for expansion. Just solid concrete painted the same dull eggshell white for the last 40 years. But now, a wooden door. Old, smooth, deep brown, stained with time and maybe tobacco by the looks of it. A perfect brass handle. No plaque, no lock you could see. And the smell, blood and rot and burnt dust all blended into one thick, invisible syrup in the hallway air. The hair on my arms went straight up. I didn't touch it, just backed away like it might jump. I pulled the hallway cam feed. 3:14 a.m., the wall sits empty. 3:16 a.m., the door is just there. No build time, no crew, no shadows entering or leaving. Just a 2-minute window between nothing and something. I radioed the captain. Told him everything, the suspect's strange answers, the unexplained blood, the new door upstairs. He said, stick to what sets real, officer, archive the incident. The next morning, cell 2 was empty. Door locked. No footage of him leaving. No record of the door opening. His uniform was folded neatly on the bench inside. But someone had drawn a wide red smile on the glass partition, like they traced it with a blood-tipped finger. I tried pulling his intake form. It was gone. Booking sheet, fingerprints, statements, name, gone. They told me there was no suspect, no ID, no evidence log for impounded clothes. They said I was overworked, that I must have mixed something up. But that blood sample, it's still in the evidence fridge. Still unmatched, still waiting. Sometimes when I pull the late shift, I go look at the door again. It still doesn't set open, still doesn't move. But the wall around it gets just a little bit darker every time I blink. And last night, I heard breathing behind it. Slow, wet, inhuman. Then just before dawn, a voice whispered so low I almost missed it. Your turn. I don't know what we let in that night, but I think it left something behind. And I know in my gut that whatever it is, it's not done. Next time someone walks into the station covered in blood and smiling, I'm afraid it's going to be me. They always tell you it's just a mirror. That two-way glass in interrogation isn't anything fancy. One side reflects, the other reveals. A design meant to manipulate the suspect to make them feel watched, judged, fragile. But ask any officer who's sat in one of those rooms long enough and they'll tell you the same thing. Eventually you stop looking at the suspect and start looking in that glass. And sometimes something looks back. I was 4 years into my career at Ashfield PD when it happened. By then I'd done plenty of interviews and interrogations. Shoplifters, drunk drivers, domestic calls, your usual small-town chaos. I wasn't a rookie anymore. Wasn't one of those neck-hot, trigger-happy guys looking for action. I liked the desk side of policing. Showing up when it's already over. Talking. Spotting the cracks. Getting the confession without ever raising my voice. That's where I was comfortable. But then the girl went missing. 10-year-old. Local. Walked home from school 3 blocks and vanished somewhere between her bus stop and her front door. It shut the town down. Door-to-door searches. Volunteer lines twice around the park. High profile. Emotional. Pressure from above. People were scared in a way I hadn't seen before. And at the center of it all, one name kept coming up. Daniel Marcus. 52. Single. Lived alone 10 houses down from hers. Former substitute teacher. No record, but the kind of guy who made people uneasy before anyone even had a reason. One of those faces you just don't want your kids around. Always sitting on his porch. Always watching. We brought him in 3 days into the search. I was assigned to the interview. Not because I was best for it, but because nobody else wanted it. No one wanted to look at him across the table. The captain just said, "Don, set, push. See if he bends." So I did what I always did. Prepped the room. Folder of photos I didn't want to look at. Recorder on standby. Mirror behind me, all empty on the other side. Or so I thought. He came in calmly, quietly. No lawyer, no protest. Just that same unreadable look, like his face wasn't entirely connected to what he was feeling. The first 12 minutes were exactly what you'd expect. Basic questions. Timeline. Routine. He stuck to his story. He hadn't left the house. He didn't hear anything. Didn't know anyone by that name. But every time I asked something that prodded near the girl, just near her, not even directly, his eyes didn't stay on me. Over my shoulder. To the mirror. At first I ignored it. People always glance around, especially under pressure. But it wasn't set random. It was consistent. Strategic. Like he was watching something in the mirror while he talked. Like he was waiting for a signal. I turned once, instinctively, just to prove to myself that it was nothing. Just reflected tiles. My own back. Harsh white glow. Nothing. But then I asked him, the exact words were, "Did you see Evelyn that day at any point, even from the front yard?" And he smiled, just barely. Then looked at me and said, "Do you know what the other side of the mirror sees?" I paused. "Excuse me." He nodded to the glass behind me. "When it sets your turn, you shall see it too." My mouth dried. That's not something you brace for in training. They prepare you for screaming, insults, even threats. But that calm certainty, that knowing, that's worse. I wrapped it up quickly after that. No outbursts, no confessions. Just a long, silent walk back to his holding cell. But the mirror, it stuck with me. Later that night, when the shift settled and the chief left me to finish up the paperwork, I went back to room B. I'd told myself it was to grab my notes. But the real reason, I wanted to stand in front of that mirror again. Just for a second, just to feel normal about it. And for the most part, it did feel normal. I stood there looking at my reflection, replaying that interview in my head, telling myself the guy was just trying to rattle me. Then the lights flickered. Just once. And when they came back on, My reflection didn't. At first I thought it was a delay. I tilted my head slightly. Nothing. Leaned in closer. It was still me. Same clothes. Same tired eyes. But I wasn't set moving. My heart did that heavy slam thing it does when you almost get in an accident. I waved. No response. I blinked. That version of me didn't text. I stepped back, and suddenly everything was in sync again, like it had never happened. I thought I'd lost it. Told myself it was exhaustion, stress, classic adrenaline crash stuff. But I started seeing it more and more after that. Every time I sat in that room, every time a suspect looked a little too calmly toward the mirror, I stayed glance, catch bits, things not right. My reflection would blink too slow, smile too long. Once I swear it leaned closer to the glass, not as a reflection but like it was coming toward me. I talked to one of the older officers, Lieutenant Barnes, been at Ashfield PD for over 30 years. I figured if anyone could ease my mind, it'd be him. He didn't laugh. He asked, "It start during the Marcus case?" I nodded. He swallowed hard. Happens every few years. Always starts after a missing kid. Then he told me something that made my stomach knot. That mirror was installed after they remodeled in '89. Before I was even born. Before I joined the force. And the little girl in that case, also named Evelyn. They never found her. He said sometimes when a case doesn't get solved, when something really awful lives in the walls of that room, it clings, like it wants to be seen. And sometimes after enough victims, after enough silence, it learns to use the glass. I didn't believe him. I couldn't. Until last week. We brought in a guy after a convenience store stabbing. Nothing to do with kids. Nothing to do with Marcus or any of the old cases. But when he sat in that chair and stared at that glass, he started whispering things. He said, "I see her." He said, "She steps behind you." He said, "She told me your name." And then he started crying. We hadn't asked him anything. I turned around and saw the mirror was black, just thick, dark, rippling like there was ink inside the glass. I reached for the door. It jammed. Lights flickered again. The blackness slid away just enough for my reflection to come back. Except it wasn't me. It was Evelyn. A girl, maybe 10, thin, pale, with sunken eyes and something smeared down the sides of her lips. She looked sad, but she was smiling. The suspect started screaming, kicking, sobbing. I left the room. I didn't say a word. We found him hanging in his cell 3 hours later. We still don't have security footage of what happened inside that room, just a dead angle, static, like the camera refused to record what it saw. They said going to replace the mirror soon. Chief says it sets old, probably warped, giving people trick reflections. But I saw the installation form. It sets not a mirror. It's two-way glass that was repurposed from somewhere else, from an asylum upstate that burned down in the '70s, a facility that housed violent offenders, including one specific man who strangled 3 children and smiled the whole time they booked him. Guess who one of his victims was? Evelyn. No last name. Just, I don't sit in that room anymore. But sometimes I pass by an empty hallway and see it, my own reflection in the darkened glass. Only now it never leaves when I do. It lingers, smiling.